I think we can start. My name is Bartek. I'm from L2-Beat. If you guys don't know what L2-Beat is, we are like a community watchdog. We're essentially here to watch the L2 space and make all the projects accountable. So the users don't have to worry so much about it, and they don't have to look at underlying trust assumptions. So we engage with every single L2 project. And I do have a wonderful panel today with different, hopefully, views. So I will start by like introducing panelists in not so random order, I guess, because there's a certain purpose here, because each one of them hopefully will give you a different viewpoint on what I think, is an important topic, which at the end of the day we should be all interested in, and that is whether the Ethereum is actually doing the right thing with its current strategy, because if it's not, then you guys may be on the wrong conference altogether, right? So I will start with Kuba, the guy in the college shirt, because hopefully he will help me to challenge all the other panelists, as he's not running an L2, if I understand correctly. So what are you doing, Kuba, here?
I'm like a simple builder, and basically with a team we're building something that some time ago aspired to become L2-Beat for DeFi, which is like we're monitoring DeFi space throughout mainnet and throughout the layer 2s. So probably this is the perspective that I offer is DeFi in the ecosystem.
But if I understand correctly, you will also represent users here, right?
Yes.
Yes, so a little bit different viewpoint than mine, but definitely, from the point of view of someone who's actually using those L2s. Then we have Grégoire, if I pronounce the name correctly with the proper French R. I'm trying really hard, it's not easy. But my understanding, Grégoire, is that you're actually working primarily in a Starknet ecosystem. And Starknet, probably you should all know that, but these guys are one of the very first rollups on Ethereum. Not the first one, but one of the first. And interestingly enough, I've been working with the team for a long time, and they are known primarily because you could argue that they're not particularly aligned with Ethereum because they're not EVM, they've got their own prover, it's like, Starknet, if you have ever done anything on Starknet, it's just different, right? It's just different. However, this is L2, so we've got a real L2 guy here.
Well, in my case, I'm not with Starkware. I run a venture studio and we help people build applications specifically on Starknet.
Which is even better.
No, at the end of the day, I would not say that they are misaligned. I think they are very aligned with the ethos. They just do things differently. And the big question is whether or not it will work. But they took bold bets, fundamentally, by starting with different languages and different VMs.
Okay, so we like people who think things differently, they can push discussion forward. Okay, now I'll move to Marek. You might have seen Marek with his previous presentation. Obviously, the head of Celo, very old blockchain, started when? In
2020.
2020.
It was when the network launched.
Just feels like 20 years ago.
Pre-pandemic. Well, actually, it was the start of the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, Celo is interesting because it's been running its L1 for a couple of years, and quite recently, you guys have announced that you actually want to become an L2. So it's like you're on a journey from being an L1 to an L2.
Absolutely. I think we're big believers in this idea that Ethereum is going to become the settlement layer of Web3. We're doing our part, and we're excited for that future. Celo, for those of you who's not familiar, it's an EVM-compatible chain focused on mobile payments primarily, and because it is EVM-compatible, we firmly believe that in this day and age, being an EVM-compatible alt L1 just doesn't make sense. There is an Ethereum scaling roadmap. if you're excited about the EVM, you should be a rollup or an L1. Sorry, L2.
Okay, and last but not least, we've got Damian here and representing Aleph Zero. If I understand correctly, you guys are running L1 chain again, but it's not like you're trying to become or migrate to L2 like Celo, but you've just launched an L2. So now you've got the best of both worlds, right? You've got both L1 and L2. Like, why?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we have been running the L1 chain, which is non-EVM, for 3 years now. And now we have decided that this is the time for expansion to EVM. So we are seeing the potential. I agree with some voices here that, yeah, this is Ethereum is probably the settlement layer for Web3. This is what is happening. So yeah, we must be in EVM. We must contribute to EVM, and what we are doing is privacy solutions. So this is what we are trying to contribute, and our way in is essentially launching an L2.
Okay, so this is setting a stage. So now you know the participants, we've got users, we've got a particular L2, or at least the developer on L2, and we've got essentially 2 L2s trying to either migrate to be, to L1s, trying to either migrate to be an L2 or trying to like have both L2 and L1. But the topic is more serious, and I will do a very, very short, like a history lesson of Ethereum for those that are not like spending 100% or 150% of your professional time following this quickly changing space. So back in the day, Ethereum was proof of work, and it was single-handedly killed by CryptoKitties, right? So nobody was happy at the time, and I think Ethereum researchers started to work almost like simultaneously on moving to proof of stake, but also on the sharding roadmap. And I'll come back to that in a moment. It took them a long, long time to think about how you should do sharding. And at the same time, projects like Nia, have already developed sharding, but Ethereum was still debating, how to do it in a secure and responsible way. In the meantime, people, I think, got like fed up and started deploying things that we all know today as rollups, right? And once Ethereum realized what's happening, they decided that sharding is not good. Rollups is the future. So they announced L2-centric roadmap. And essentially, they told everybody, hey, look at these guys who are deploying rollups. They are doing the right thing, and we think that is the scaling. So we're not going to do sharding and execution sharding anymore. We're going to do just DA scaling, right? And in the meantime, we're going to upgrade to proof of stake, and we're going to work on making the DA layer of Ethereum highly scalable. So we've started tracking rollups, and at the time we had like a dozen, maybe, all big projects, very sophisticated, and suddenly a new player entered the scene called Celestia, and they told everybody, hey, you know what, you don't have to be so like enshrined to Ethereum, you can do whatever you want with your rollups, and by the way, you're sovereign. And we're going to build an infrastructure that will allow you to actually build rollups in a modular way, super simple. And if you're now building like smart contracts, in the future you will be like building your own rollups, right? As easily as you're building smart contracts. And few companies actually, which we call them rollups as a service, appeared, and they allow anyone to launch their own rollup very cheaply. And as a result, on L2Beat, we've got today like 100 rollups, maybe. Another 100 is upcoming. We've been warned. Then in 2 years, we're gonna have thousands of rollups, and this is more or less where we are today, right? So the rollups are blossoming. People are launching them left and right, and I think the community has divided themselves into 3, maybe, or more camps. And my first question to the panelists is like, where you sit on this divide. So the camp number 1 would be like the modular maximalists, right? Like people saying, hey, modular is the king, build whatever. Everybody should have their own rollup, right? Everybody, all of you, should have their own rollup. The camp number 2 is like rational people saying, well, rollups are good, but I think we need like maybe 10 of them at the most, right? And it's I don't know, fight of survival. So maybe few of them will survive, all the others gonna fail, and it's gonna be fun to watch, like get the popcorn ready, right? And then the third camp is saying that, well, I mean, look what you've done. Now we've got thousands of rollups. It's all been a mistake. Rollups are parasitic to Ethereum. It's never going to work. Like, look at Solana, look at NIA. These guys are doing the right thing. Just reflect. So, so maybe I'll start with Damian.
Yeah, cool. So I think I'm somewhere in between 2 and 3. So first of all, I am a person who believes in sharding, that this is the end game. But also I think that actually changing the roadmap and going for rollup-centric path was actually a good decision. And actually we want rollups now. I think the rollups are giving us a lot of value, and I will actually talk about this a little bit later. So why do I believe in sharding? So, I mean, there is a certain level to which you can scale a chain by itself, like a solo chain, like a monolithic chain, like Solana. So there are certain like physical limits where you can get. At some point, I mean, no matter what we do, we will hit these limits. So I think sharding is inevitable. At some point, we will need it, no matter how much, I don't know, how much cores do we get on a machine, how much disk space do we have. We need to chop this. We need to chop execution, we need to chop the state. This is something that we have to do. However, I wanted to emphasize that sharding is actually hard. So people who are saying, why didn't we actually go with this sharding idea? So there is one important technical insight here. So if you go from non-sharded Ethereum to sharded Ethereum, there is actually a large price that you pay, because you cannot just say that we will just migrate all the contracts and everything will work as before. Developers will not need to care about sharding, because this is not true. Once you shard the state, once you shard execution, you get this asynchronicity. You need to send cross-shard messages, and cross-shard messages are not atomic. So essentially it's not the case that the developers can just forget about sharding. They need to be sharding aware. And you can see, in particular, in the NEAR ecosystem, that writing contracts in this asynchronous model is actually quite hard. And on NEAR, essentially every account, every contract is its own shard. So every cross-contract call is asynchronous. And this is really making it difficult to write contracts, because now, if you are making a cross-contract call, then whatever state changes have you committed before this call will not be reverted if the call fails. You cannot do that. So this is a source of lots of complexity. I think this was the main reason why we see rollups, because this was just easier to build, right? People want, the developers want synchronous execution. They want atomicity. This is what makes composability easy. This is what makes composability possible, right? And this is what was kind of convenient. But I think, inevitably we'll need to kind of solve this problem. We cannot scale indefinitely.
Okay, so we're gonna come back. Let's spark some thoughts here, because you're raising a lot of topics. But let's just hear from Marek. Are you happy that you will compete now with hundreds of different rollups, or you just don't care because they are most of them are gonna die in a few years?
Well, I think we're competing with them regardless, right? They're still chains at the end of the day, and I don't think whether you're an L1 or L2 changes who you're competing against. I would say I'm somewhere between 1 and 2. I'm gonna say that because you said that number 2 is the only rational choice, so I have to include 2. Cannot be irrational on stage here. And the reason I say that is...
The only reason I'm saying that is that, it's a pain for us to follow thousands of rollups on L2 I just try to stop people doing this, save us.
Whether it's rational or not for people to launch their own rollups, we're seeing that there seems to be a lot of demand for people to want to launch their own roadmaps, their own rollups. And L2s. Whether or not the market will sustain that, I think, it's a really hard question to answer. But I do think, just on the topic of, sharding versus rollup-centric future, I do think that I agree. I would say there's 2 problems with the sharded approach, right? Number 1, absolutely, programming with asynchronous composability is extremely difficult. We're seeing, how hard it is in Polkadot and even Near, and that's definitely slowing them down. But number 2, there's also security implications, right? I think rollup-centric approach has much better security properties than these sharding approaches right now. And I do think that both of these problems will change with full synchronous composability. And that can come to Ethereum with the current rollup-based approach. Once we have either base sequencing or some sort of shared sequencing and real-time proofs of transactions, when you can combine both of these things, suddenly you'll be able to actually scale with and do synchronous, so not asynchronous, composability across shards in or across L2s in Ethereum. And I think once that happens, Ethereum is going to be golden. It's going to take a long time to get there, but it's feasible with the current technology. And you talk to Justin Drake and folks at Espresso, and they're all really excited about this future. And I think what's exciting is that Ethereum can scale today without waiting for that future. Whereas everybody else going after the sharding roadmap today, they're not able to scale the way that Ethereum can scale. And so, yes, we're sacrificing UX for users. Users have to deal with moving assets back and forth between chains. Yes, we're making things a little bit difficult, but we're not sacrificing security, and we're going to improve the UX over time. And in the meantime, the whole ecosystem can blossom. There can be lots of competition. There can be lots of nice innovation. I think ultimately that is why I'm very excited about Ethereum.
Okay, I'll pass maybe to Grégoire first, if I may, because I'm kind of curious. How is it to be in one of the ecosystems that used to be one of the very few, and now it may be one of the hundreds, right? Is it good or is it bad, or do you think that what do you see the future? Only the biggest ones are gonna survive, or we indeed are going to see thousands of competing ecosystems?
So, I mean, my answer is not going to be an engineering answer. I'm someone who works around commercial entities and ecosystems.
Maybe it's not an engineering problem,
No, it clearly is not. It's always a coordination problem. Today, we've got a lot of rollups that appear because a lot of people want to invest in them because it's a good trade, actually. In the end state, I'm pretty sure that most of them will die, like most startups die. Now, the reality is that what matters fundamentally is developer experience and user experience. Today, when you look at the question that you asked, I think that actually some rollups can give extremely good user experience, and sharding, for example, on Near led to good user experience as well. I assume you remember probably Sweatcoin. Sweatco, the company who ended up creating that product, was a simple company on which you would walk, earn some points, and then you could acquire some items through marketing partnerships. They ended up creating an app on which you have a wallet. The entire blockchain is abstracted. It works. People are happy with it. I'm not sure it's a sustainable business model. I kind of don't care about that. But end users were happy about it. So at the end of the day, that's what really matters to me. I think that we're seeing a lot of competition, which is good for innovation at the end of the day. And that's what truly matters. So Starkware specifically were a first mover in how they did things. And I do believe that like they pioneered some like amazing technologies. Now, what really matters is what people do with these technologies, because that's what we care about. You know, at the end of the day, everything is open source. So if someone creates something extremely brilliant, but nobody uses it, at some point someone else is going to take advantage of that. And a very good example would be how Polkadot pioneered substrates, and how substrates is basically like applied to the Starknet ecosystem, and how it's basically is going to be like one of the key technologies that you use to deploy app chains. So, I mean, we're all benefiting from it. So there's no really bad situation out of that, you know, growth, I would say.
Okay, so let's finish this round of Kuba. My question specifically to you is that you guys, kind of similarly to L2-Beat, you know, you had to worry about maybe a dozen of different vaults for DeFi users on dozens of rollups. Now that you've got thousands of rollups, you're going to be managing thousands of different deployments potentially, right? I mean, do users actually care? I mean, do you see that, you know, this is indeed, you know, something that's important and sustainable in the future, or from the point of view of like a typical DeFi user that is trying to find, you know, where is the best yield opportunity or whatever, you know, at the end of the day, they will end up on, I don't know, one of the 5 chains.
Yes, so I'm going to start with your initial question, which will lead us to your current question, which is I'm in a fourth camp. Like as a user, the fourth camp is I'm happy. There was this movie, it's called Boondock Saints, Święci z Bostonu. Who saw Święci z Bostonu, Boondock Saints? There's couple. So there was a super inappropriate joke in this movie that unfortunately I cannot tell because it was like about racial communities or whatever, but I'm going to paraphrase. And it goes like this. So you're telling me that all the NFT craze is going to Zora, and the meme coins are going to Base, and some crazy token launches are going to layer 2s and blasts of the world and whatever, then I'll have a Coca-Cola. It's amazing experience to be able to interact with mainnet without congestion and with cheap fees. Like, so for me, like we're already...
So no more CryptoKitties problem?
I mean, we're already in an amazing place. Like I'm, like as a DeFi user, I'm happy I can interact. And like, I'm also in a camp, you know, Ethereum use case is finance. So if Ethereum use case is finance, that is actually a good outcome for now. Now we can have a later conversation, what can we improve on a layer 1 and whatever. But coming back to your like second question, DeFi is like 90% mainnet right now, and probably like 9% Arbitrum, and then it's the rest of it. So this is the status for now, and it is an okay experience. And like we're going to manage because we don't need to support 1,000 rollups right now because the TVL, DeFi TVL there is like minuscule.
Okay, that's interesting. So I do wonder then, you know, like unless you already have a user base, then you may actually find it hard, right, to attract new users for your new rollup. If you just say, hey, we're space number, you know, 45 for DeFi, right? You know, you have to do better. Anyway, I mean, one thing that you've mentioned, and I think that everybody of you have noticed, is that suddenly now it's, if you're using L2s, obviously, it's like super cheap to use them, right? Which is good, you know, which is the experience that we always wanted. And suddenly, surprisingly or not, you know, people started, like they used to complain about high gas fees on Ethereum and saying that Ethereum was unusable and crap. Now they're saying that, you know, Ethereum suddenly became cheap, right? The gas prices are low, so probably ETH suddenly is not deflationary anymore. And now, again, you know, that seems like another topic to complain. So you can't make everybody happy, right? Actually, you know, there's always be people complaining. However, you know, the more serious question is, are we going into the right direction in terms of like economics, right? And we're gonna go back to technology again, but I think, you know, there are different kind of like angles. You know, we can look at the scaling roadmap and the economy of ETH and rollups paying or not paying the rent and whatnot. Like, what the heck is going on here, right? I mean, clearly there's a lot of people saying that maybe rollups are extracting value from ETH and they don't pay enough for DA and for the settlement. And this is not good. This is not sustainable, right? You know, at the end of the day, you know, that's gonna like eventually make Ethereum broke, and then maybe, I don't know, the biggest rollups will just say, okay, now I'm like have a big enough user space that I don't need to settle anymore, and who knows, maybe they will do the opposite. From being L2, they will become L1. I don't know. What do you guys think about it? Maybe I'll start with Marek this time.
Yeah, I think haters are always going to hate. So, yeah, I think no matter what you do, there's going to be always complaining. But no, my take is I don't think L2s are extracting value right now. I think the value that Ethereum gets by having 1,000 very used rollups settling on Ethereum is going to be extremely powerful for Ethereum. And I think ultimately, in a world where you do have scalability, you have no choice but to charge very little for transactions. And so that means that the only way that you can make money is if you are settling lots and lots and lots of transactions. And so the current Ethereum scaling roadmap is clearly a really good way of getting there. And then longer term, you know, there's many ways that Ethereum can make additional revenue from all of these rollups, right? So data availability is certainly one thing. But you know, we talked about base sequencing before here, and then also in a talk earlier today. You know, base sequencing is another really great way that Ethereum can in the future potentially make additional revenue. Justin Drake talks about also having a specific validation opcode as well, like a specific opcode that can verify like a canonical ZK snark-based proof that proves that a particular set of state transitions in a L2 were correct. Basically, think of this as creating a standard way of verifying ZK EVMs. That would be yet another way that Ethereum can make revenue. And so, you know, sequencing, data availability, validation, these are all these important building blocks to operating and running an L2 or a rollup, and Ethereum can easily make a lot of revenue that way. So I'm not too worried. I think what's more important right now is to grow and to capture all of those transactions.
Are you worried, Damian, or you don't care that much because at the end of the day, you know, sharding is what is needed?
Yeah.
And by the way, you know, I just wanted to sort of maybe take this opportunity and let you explain why. I'm kind of assuming that you don't really consider rollups to be shards, even though each rollup at the end of the day, they have their own storage, right? So some people argue that it is a way of sharding the state because Ethereum doesn't really know much about the specific state of the rollup, right? It only knows about the state commitment. So it is already sharded with thousands of rollups. Like, what's wrong with that?
Yeah. So I think that's a good point. And actually, I think it is sharded indeed. Rollups are shards. But it's a little bit funny because for Polkadot or let's say Near, this is what they are building. They are building sharded chains, and they have this particular spec that they are implementing, and there are shards there. On Ethereum, it kind of happens spontaneously, right? It is actually funny, and I like that. And I would like to make this point: how are rollups actually contributing and bringing value to Ethereum? My opinion is that all this technological innovation that they're bringing, the competition between all these rollups, is bringing a lot of value. Because assume we wanted to build sharding on Ethereum, would it be easy to do it from scratch? No. And all these rollups are building this technology. They are competing, they are building different implementations, and all of that teaches us like which thing is the best, which version is the one that we should put in maybe future Ethereum specification, right? So this is one point. And the second point I would like to make is about essentially how the rollups should pay or bring monetary value to Ethereum. So yeah, I don't want to open the Pandora box here about secured by Ethereum. So this is some kind of a meme currently. And L2
we can certainly discuss that.
Yeah, L2 is doing a great job to show you how this security level actually is. But there is like clearly a trade-off. The more you post to Ethereum, the more you actually use Ethereum, the more fees you pay to Ethereum, the more secure you are. I mean, that's the current state, and there is no doubt about it. So obviously, the rollups that don't pay a lot, they have certainly a lower security level. And maybe, just maybe, we'll see some hacks. We will see some examples where this becomes important, right? And maybe then how people view this will change. I think eventually, yeah, if we consider Ethereum as the place, the safe haven, where we have the highest level of security, then eventually rollups will bring monetary value to Ethereum because they have to, right?
So, but let's focus on fees and let's explore a little bit more. I mean, there are a few other interesting aspects there, I think. So going to you, Gregoire, Starknet, interestingly enough, for those that don't know, they seem to be paying quite a high fees for what we call the settlement, essentially, which is posting, state and proving that state to Ethereum. It's a ZK rollup, but they don't take advantage of the existing precompiles. They don't do what we, like in our jargon, call the final snark wrap of the proof, which everybody else is doing, but they stick to Starks, right? They stick to the protocol called Fry. This is quite complicated protocol. It just burns a lot of gas, when you actually execute it on chain. And they've been doing this, since like day one, meaning, I don't know, 4 years now. I mean, quite a lot, I think. And they continue to pay a lot of money, right, for the settlement, which I would imagine may impact, the price of doing transactions on Starknet one way or the other. So I'm kind of like interested in your take. I mean, I know my answer, but I'm curious whether, like, from your point of view, this is something that should be encouraged, so this is a legacy, or like, what's going on there, like, from your point of view?
I mean, in their case, when you look at Eli's work on Stark specifically, they believe it's a better technology, to put it simply. At the moment, there's around 400 TPS. Like, transaction costs are extremely low. There's not that many transactions, though. Let's be honest about that. So I think it's just taking a different approach. If everybody is working on Snarks and they're working on Starks, and at the end of the day Snarks are right, they can still move towards that. But working on Starks can give them a pretty big edge in the long run if they're right. So it is a human decision, and I do think that so far, like, the technological solutions that they found are pretty impressive, I would have to say. It is a key differentiator, and it's actually what matters at the end of the day. It's like, when you look at Starkware, I think that whether you care or not about attraction, everybody respects them on the R&D game. And it's just impressive what they managed to try to do. And at the moment, for example, having the capacity to work with Bitcoin Core developers to potentially settle there, and like OPCAT it's very interesting directions that they are taking. Now, it takes time, and fundamentally, we'll see whether or not it works in terms of commercial viability, in terms of ecosystem, because that's what matters at the end of the day. So it's a different route that they decided to take. It's a subjective decision. Like, that's fundamentally what it is. Now, when it comes to the previous questions you asked, I think, there's a first thing I want to say is, like, we're talking about peanuts today. Like, we're not moving that much data, we're not moving that much money. But there's actually one question that I would have for you, Marek, because Salo moved from L1 to L2, and you guys had actually quite a lot of like traction. I don't remember the exact number on the L1, so I'm actually very intrigued about it.
It's big, right?
Yeah, we're processing over 1 million transactions a day. There's about, I was checking today, 650,000 daily active users.
Mm-hmm. And in your case, why did you decide to go from the L1 to the L2 specifically?
I think it's a philosophical, maybe ideological reason, right? As I mentioned before, Ethereum now has a scaling roadmap. And if you are an EVM-compatible chain, it just feels odd to not be part of that scaling roadmap. When we started, they were still thinking about sharding, Ethereum 2.0 back then. And there was no way for us to plug into that roadmap and focus on our mission around financial inclusion and making mobile payments and mobile DeFi more accessible to everyone in the world. There was no way to do that cheaply as part of the Ethereum roadmap. So we launched our own L1. We created our own proof-of-stake consensus protocol. I think we were the first EVM-compatible proof-of-stake network out there. We removed all of the proof-of-work related stuff from the headers, which then bit us because developers were complaining. So we had to re-add them. But ultimately, it just made sense at the time to launch as a standalone L1. But now, it just doesn't make sense. Our builders are building for all of Ethereum. We also started in Ethereum. The reason we launched this L1 to begin with is because we tried to build a really easy-to-use mobile wallet on Ethereum, and then CryptoKitties came, and we're like, oh, okay, this isn't going to work. We're going to need to launch our own L1. And so fundamentally, we're just so aligned with the ethos of Ethereum, it just didn't make sense for us to not be part of the current roadmap when we could fit in so nicely.
That's a cool answer.
So you guys see that there are chains that are not afraid to pay significantly more for the settlement because of certain conviction, be it the superiority of the technology or the lack of certain trust assumptions that you would have with other technologies and whatnot, right? And from what I'm hearing, it's like not entirely clear at all what will be in the future the real cost of settlement, because the whole thing is changing, right? My question to Kuba is like, do users actually care, or this is something that it's a very important discussion, but at the level of developers and infrastructure builders and whatnot. But at the end of the day, what do users care about? I mean, clearly low fees are important, right? But the other one that I hope that we're gonna move the discussion towards is this I don't know, holy grail of interoperability, which some people say it has to be synchronous. It just has to, right? Anything else just won't work. But at the same time, I feel like the TradFi is asynchronous. We managed to work around it by having a superb user interface. When you do the bank transfers, you don't know that everything below is asynchronous to the point that the settlement happens 3 days after, which is like hugely asynchronous, right?
Using FTP of files around.
Yes, some systems from the 70s, I guess. Yeah, I mean, like, what is your perspective here?
Yeah, so users obviously don't care what exact mechanism is there. Now there's another group of people.
They just want yield, right?
It's ETH holders. And now we're talking, and I guess like this discussion is getting more intense right now because, price is falling and a lot of people were expecting it's going up. So it's kind of...
Buy the dip.
Yeah, it's getting like intense right now, and we're talking about this, but we're not the only ones that's having this discussion. And I don't think it's super relevant, like what exact parameters are set in these mechanisms. It's like 10 years from now, what's going to matter is which one of these coins is like a sustainable store of value. And I guess Ethereum is positioned like very, very well compared to some other chains out there, regardless of like what exact blob price we choose today or not to choose today. So yeah, that's basically my point.
Okay, so can we like explore a little bit, this interoperability issue? I think, or maybe before we go that, just one more question about prices, because like settlement fees, DA fees, there's just one component, right? But this whole thing of being parasitic also touches on a point like. What is the role of sequences, running those L2s? Do they actually extract all the fees? Are the fees related to MEV or to chain congestion or to the settlement costs? Or again, this is like very fluid and that's going to change in the future. Like what's going on here? Because like literally every single rollup right now is using centralized sequencer, right? So normally you would think the centralized sequencers should extract MEV. Turns out that this is not really the case. At least I'm not aware of anyone like openly extracting an MEV. So maybe this is a good thing to have a centralized sequencer. But on the other hand, everybody wants to decentralize sequences, which will, in my opinion, increase settlement costs, but maybe open up, like, I don't know, like another can of worms, also related to fees. So how do you guys see that problem? Especially from the point of view like Celo, for example, that's moving from a decentralized infrastructure to what I believe will be fairly centralized in the short term, at least.
Yes, so certainly our plan is to have a decentralized sequencer, and our what we're working through right now is how to do that in a way that's compatible with the superchain and something that we can do in the near term, and also I guess compatible with what the broader Ethereum ecosystem is doing. There is base sequencing, there's also espresso, there's a lot of different competing offerings on this front, and we're eagerly waiting to see what is the Schelling point going to align around, because I think we want to be as compatible as Ethereum aligned as possible. But in terms of MEV, I do think that, certainly I'm seeing a lot of L2 stacks moving towards being able to auction out the right to build these blocks for the sequencer to then put their stamp of approval on. So I think even with centralized sequencers, we're seeing a direction that will lead to more MEV. And then I'm also seeing decentralized sequencers getting pushback from these stacks saying, hey, we don't want to just give up our MEV to you. So now these decentralized protocols are also coming up with ways to separate block building from effectively putting their stamp on a particular block and saying that this block is final, it can't be rolled back. And so there I'm seeing actually also a big push towards, again, letting block builders build these blocks. And ultimately, actually, this is important because this is ultimately what's going to allow full composability, or even in the short term, just atomic inclusion of transactions across chains. Because if you want to have, sorry, I should say atomic execution. If you want to have atomic inclusion, a shared sequencer is enough to accomplish that. You can just include 2 transactions, no problem. But if you want to guarantee that both of these execute, a typical shared sequencer will not give that to you. But if you suddenly give a block builder the ability to create blocks where they guarantee that both of these transactions will execute, then now we're talking and we can actually do atomic inclusion execution. And that's going to be really powerful for not full composability, but for enabling some level of interop that will hopefully be useful to make various chain abstraction primitives that will make lives easier for end users. So yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of work happening in that direction. How much MEV extraction will happen ultimately, I don't know. I know Justin Drake has this argument that MEV over time has been going down. So maybe in the end it won't matter, but I think that's yet to be seen.
But it's something interesting to see like good analysis of the actual traffic on these L2s, because I'm hearing arguments that because there's no chance to have an off-chain auctions, all the auctions moved on-chain, and the majority of the traffic is actually bots, and searches trying to kind of like hit, the proper ARB opportunities, especially that it's cheap to do, right? The cheaper the fees, the cheaper is to spam the network with whatever activity, right?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely seeing a lot of tipping happening to these sequencers in order to try to win arbitrage opportunities, do things that would traditionally end up going to block builders, but now are just going to sequencers.
So how's this discussion looks like, in like Darknet camp, where I know that you guys have big plans for decentralization. You've been talking about that for years, but also having a unique proof system, might actually give you a certain edge in this respect, right? And I've seen some proposals, ZK threads and whatnot. Some interesting ideas that being kind of sovereign allows you to experiment, right, around these ideas. So how do you, do you like see these discussions? What does it look like, from where you sit?
So I mean, from my perspective, first on the topic of decentralization and Starknet, you see that they're doing quite a lot of efforts with the SNPs, and they encourage the community to give them basically a lot of feedback, and they take these into account. I know L2beat is quite active actually in these discussions, and I do believe it's the best way to build, to make sure that the developer community is happy about what you do and that everybody's aligned in the direction that you're taking. On the specific topic of MEV, at the moment you don't see anything on Starknet, let's be very honest. I think when you think about MEV, you need to think about arbitrage, specifically talking. When you want to compare MEV on Ethereum or Solana, for example, you would have to realize that MEV on Solana is harder fundamentally than Ethereum, because it's just a more competitive environment. Things are cheaper, blocks are just happen faster. So in an environment that is more competitive, you extract less fees. So at the end of the day, we can consider that maybe they disappear. But for Starknet's perspective, on my end, I don't really have a strong perspective on what's going to happen, to be honest.
Damian, you seem to have a very strong opinions on interoperability, which I'm not really sure I can agree with. But tell us why do you think that atomic is important, and whether you do shards or rollups or whatever, you have to overcome this problem, because otherwise, I don't know. I mean, otherwise we're all gonna end up using Solana or whatever.
Right. So I have to say that as a user, whether things are asynchronous, whether we have app chains, whether we have one big L1, I don't really care. I just want to use one wallet. I want to interact with Web3 easily. So this is the goal of what we want to ship to the user. But as a developer who needs to write contracts, who needs to develop the apps, well, that's a different story. So developing an EVM contract and deploying on an EVM chain, well, it's simple. Currently, it's we have lots of tooling. We have developers who can do that, who teach other developers. So the ecosystem is blooming. So this is great. And I mean, we already know how to write synchronous contracts. But, well, once we have this kind of challenges coming from asynchronous calls between apps, between rollups, between what we call them shards, things change. I mean, things change a lot because the developers will make mistakes. They will not consider all the options of what can happen. If you have 3 cross-contract calls, you have a billion of options of which call can fail, and then whether you handle all the failures correctly. It is just lots of complexity. And honestly, I'm kind of torn between sharding, which kind of forces you to solve this problem, and not sharding, which, well, is then fully synchronous. So I just hope that we develop this good interoperability solutions that kind of make it easy for developers to, kind of deal with the asynchronicity in the execution environment.
And maybe just to challenge a little bit, I guess, Bartek, maybe this was also a challenge to your statement that if we need synchronicity, we have to go to Solana. I fundamentally disagree. Ultimately, there is no reason why with snarks, real-time proving, and either based or shared sequencing, we can't actually get synchronous full composability across different rollups without having to go to the monolithic L1 model.
And when do you think we're going to have a real-time proving? Just a rough estimate?
I mean, sure, it might take 3 years, but it'll happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's the estimate that I've also heard, like 3 to 5 years. So that's the only concern, right? Do we have that much time? I don't know. Guys, we're slowly at the top of the hour, so maybe we have time for one more last hot take, or maybe some closing statement that you'd like the audience to ponder.
Yeah, so aren't we solving for some hypothetical future with the interoperability? Like if we would have a full room today of Polymarket users and we would ask them, do you have a problem with interoperability? They would say no, they don't. They just go on Polymarket and just use Polymarket. And I agree, for many, many applications in the future, this is a real valid problem. But I guess that is sort of overblown because we are a developer, we're technical community.
But is there a reason Polymarket needs to live on chain and be atomically composable with whatever? Or maybe this is a great example of of an app that would benefit from being on its own rollup, having its own mempool and whatnot, right?
There's a big reason for Polymarket to be on-chain and to be, censorship-proof, and there's a lot of reasons for Polymarket to be on-chain. Does it have to interoperate with other stuff? Maybe you want to have some special perps on the, bets, shares, whatever. There are possibly degen use cases right there that interoperability might unlock. But do we need it now, today? I don't know. I think we still need to find our use cases and our initial traction, like some of the applications are already finding.
Meme coins don't need interoperability. And that seems to be what gets everyone excited these days. So I don't know. I think we probably have 3 years to find those use cases that really need all that composability.
I think DeFi is really one space where interoperability matters a lot. I mean, all these apps, DEXs, lending protocols, they kind of work together very nicely. But if you have one chain, there's a lending protocol, another chain where there is something that the lending protocol wants to talk with. Currently, it's not possible. Also, the problem, we are talking...
Is that true? I mean, there are instances of Aave that allow you to use bridged assets in those instances.
Yeah, correct. But this is all because Aave has worked a lot to make this possible. And this is really a customized solution, right? This is not a solution that is available to everyone, to app builders. And this is what makes it hard to build cross-chain apps.
It depends on the use case, to be honest, but I tend to agree. Liquidity fragmentation is a pain for everyone, and it tends to make no sense. The only people really profiting out of the current situation at the moment are arbitrageurs and traders, specifically, because there's just more and more inefficiencies. But that's how the world works. Huh? We extract value out of inefficiencies, and we often create inefficiencies just for the sake of capitalism.
All right, guys, our time is up. Thank you guys so much. It's been a real pleasure. I hope you guys, enjoyed the conversation, and I hope the future is bright. Even though we have to still overcome, some hurdles on the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.